So last session of the day, and as Maria said, after this, drinks are waiting for you guys outside, and we're gonna have fun in this session. But my name is Ashwin Groth. I know most of you in this room, but some are new faces. So I support Maria in her role as the executive director and advisory to her. So of course, this panel is very important. This is some discussion that we have been having at least for a while now, because. And we'll talk about the topic that we're going to discuss here, but I just want to put this in perspective. So a couple of things. Drones are here to stay. We have a lot of challenges around drones. So just to put this in perspective, as of the latest number that FAA has published, so today we have almost 869,472 to be exact, drones that are registered. This does not count any unregistered that you have in your homes or anywhere else. Out of those, 63% are for recreational purposes, and only 37% are registered as commercial use. So that means that drones are going to grow, the market is going to grow, and challenges that are associated with the drone are going to grow also. And right now, based on some of the projections, how the drone market is growing, and especially the commercial space, from one of the forecasts, so by 2025, this market is estimated to be around $63 billion. So what that means is that as this drone are being acquired for recreational purposes or commercial, problems are going to grow, especially when it comes to public safety. So the reason is we're not here to talk about how to use drones or something, but the breakout session we'll talk about is the challenges that our public safety community faces when it comes to fighting against the small commercial drones. And detecting them. As you know that people in corrections, for example, I'll use that as a correction, I'll let these guys talk about other uses that I know of, is that correction is facing that challenge firsthand right now where they are being used for a lot of other purposes, not by the staff, but by the folks who are in the system. And so what we want to talk about this was a use case in this breakout session, and we have two great speakers, and I'll introduce Sergeant Michael Ward from New Jersey State Police, who's going to talk about the use case and what they're doing in fighting against some of these challenges that they have and how to address those challenges in detecting these drones. Lyndon Ziamba, who is actually a CEO and founder of Air Defense and a great supporter of IGES, has been involved in IGES for a while, and also sits on the Corrections Advisory Committee. So I will turn it over to both of them to give them an opportunity to talk about their background and then get into the discussion of and talk about the use case of the mobile actual detection.
All right, thank you, Ashwini. I'm Linda Ziamba, in case you couldn't decipher between Sergeant Ward and me. In 2015, I founded Aero Defense, which is a passive radio frequency-based drone and pilot controller detect, track, and locate system. So my background, part of my background was communications and internet security. And that is what enabled me to envision a system that would be affordable and usable by a wide array of people versus the more military-grade solutions that were only available at the time when I looked at that. The majority of our customers are correctional institutions. The inmates perfected drone delivery a few years ago, so they have lots of product being delivered. We're a new IGES member, but not new to IGES, as Ashwin said. We've worked with the team over the years to help share what we're learning, because it's very new, threat and technology, and we've tried to share that over the years. Both the threat and the technologies to combat it. I'm on the corrections committee, so Fred Roselle and Tom Herzog pointed out to me that the flow of people goes from law enforcement, where they're apprehended, and then through criminal justice, through corrections, and we shouldn't have solution silos. So I will turn it over now to Mike Ward, who's with New Jersey State Police and an Aero Defense customer who has experience using various types of drone detection technologies.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Linda. Thank you to the IGES community for allowing me to be down here and talk about this topic. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
So I think it was the Assistant Chief from Austin this morning that said the cops are jacks of all trades, masters of nothing. That's me. I'm a bomb tech, originally with the state police, and then I asked them the question one day of why we couldn't get drones to help us with suspicious packages. And I think it's about 6 years later, I'm doing all the work on drone policy, and obviously shortly after that, I became involved in the counter UAS world, probably around 2018, 19. If there's any questions at all throughout the presentation, just raise your hand and ask as we go. I work better that way instead of waiting until the end, and it's a small group so we can be kind of interactive. But the goal of the presentation is to kind of go through the flow. We'll talk about UAS as a threat, some of the regulatory landscape issues that we're facing with the FCC and the FAA, and then a lot of times what happens is, state and local entities are kind of left with the big question of, well, what can we do? So we'll go over some of that, and I can highlight some of the things that we've done in New Jersey to form a task force and go after federal grant funding to support the projects. So drones as a threat. We classify in three categories: the careless, clueless, and criminal. The criminal, the nefarious, the terroristic use, obviously that's the lower percentage that we're dealing with right now in the United States, but it's got the highest threat potential. If you look at what's going on down in Mexico with I think it's the CJNG cartel, weaponizing drones and using them for attacks, things are getting pretty bad down there, and then obviously there's a lot coming out of the Ukraine-Russian conflict with the use of drones, just commercial off-the-shelf drones that are being weaponized. Going back to the clueless and careless actors, for the most part, we've been running counter UAS details for aggressively for 2 years now, I guess, once we got our first system. And that's who we're interacting with for the most part, is the clueless and careless. And our goal right now is to just try to educate them. The big threat with those clueless and careless actors, and I'll talk about a recent job that we did. We had a line of duty death in New Jersey, and we had a large funeral procession at the university. There was coordinated drone flights that day with the media and with local law enforcement, and then there was the media helicopters. So at one point I came out of the trailer and I looked up and we had 6 drones, 4 helicopters over this event. And it's nerve-wracking. I was like, I didn't sign up to be an air traffic controller, but then we started seeing drones with our protection equipment that were in the area that weren't, whitelisted with the media or the law enforcement. So trying to locate those operators, because they're just trying to get eyes on the situation, but the last thing we need is their drone crashing into one of our drones, or signal loss and it flies up and hits a helicopter. So flights over crowds is a big issue with those clueless and careless actors. And the real concern is just, the way that technology is growing, the ease of operation. They're getting easier to operate. They can carry heavier payloads. The flight times are increasing, and the whole time this is going on, the cost is going down. They're getting cheaper to buy. This next slide here is just some photos of some weaponized drones. The first one there, it's either a homemade drone or they just strip the components out of an off-the-shelf drone, but they had like a bazooka hooked up to it. I think the first two on the left, or the first 3 are probably ISIS coming out of the Middle East, and then the one on the far right, it looks sandy, but that's a lot of what they're seeing over in the Ukraine, is those like Navic 2s with grenades, drop grenades. But any questions? Is a threat? Has anybody in their agencies been talking about drones at major events, or that a concern that has come up? The airspace.
From a civilian standpoint, what's the level of concern? Average Joe?
For us?
No, for us.
Oh, for average Joe?
Yeah.
So the biggest problem, I think, is that there's the FAA has instituted, I think it's called the Trust Act or something. You have to go online and you just take this little test that kind of says, you get a basic understanding of the airspace, the FAA regulations. I don't know that most of the people that we interact with are very apologetic. They didn't know, so we try to give them a flyer with some of the basic FAA regulations, but, they don't know that they can't go above 400 feet, or they can't fly over crowds, or out of line of sight. So those are all the things that, we try to just educate them. I think it comes up in another slide, but we also developed like a dashboard with our New Jersey Office of Homeland Security preparedness, just so when we hand them this flyer, instead of just saying, hey, you can't fly here for the state police, it's more like an educational, see something, say something pamphlet with a QR code to the dashboard, so they can check out some of the FAA websites and some of the apps that they download to their phones to.
So I can speak a little bit to that. 'Cause our other clients are stadiums, for example, and their typical concern is the clueless and careless. They're trying to get selfies of themselves, and they're maybe a little drunked up, and they don't know that over a crowd where their drone could fly fine on a non-event day, but when it's loaded with more cell phone broadcaster and everybody's streaming Wi-Fi, the saturation goes up like 50,000 times. So it's very easy to lose control of your drone. So then the risk to the general public is that drone falls and hits someone, the baby kills them, lands in a cookout grill, and I'm thinking lithium batteries in a grill, probably a bad combination. So it's really that accidental kind of damage, I think, that is the biggest threat.
Payload, I'm going to here, so what would be I guess it varies, but isn't there a limit to certain size drones or something like that?
Yeah, the payload capacity will vary from drone to drone. Like the homemade one there probably has a beefed up battery, maybe the motors, are a little bit bigger. Maybe they took those guts out of a larger drone. The smaller drones like the Mavic 2s, Mavic 3s, they can probably hold like 2 to 4 kilograms. They're going to lose flight time, but they'll have some payload capacity, and then it's really easy to wire in like a little servo release mechanism to drop it.
Yeah, it's like $25 from Amazon, you can have the release mechanism. But a lot of the correctional facilities are seeing much heavier payloads come in, like garbage bags full, 10, 15, 20 pounds, and the drones just get more powerful and the battery life gets longer, so the threat increases.
Yeah, that one on the left, I don't know where the picture came from, but you're seeing that style along the southern border too, to carry the narcotics and stuff across the border.
And you had a question?
Yeah, my question was, so like, you get a lot of these cases, stories, clueless and careless, and like, you say, oh, I didn't know what to do. How do they get like caught? Are people like calling and complaining, or are you guys like detecting it, like the drones in the airspace, like?
Yes, so we do have some detection equipment. We're building out like a multi-layered approach to that. That's probably the easiest way to catch them.
Yeah,
It's hard to see them
all like
visually.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes during like the civil unrest in 2020, we were seeing a lot over some of those crowds. We were able to pick them out with no equipment, just because they weren't trying to hide too much. And they're usually off by themselves because it's hard to take off and land inside of a crowd. So they're usually outliers. I think they usually stand there holding.
it's pretty,
Yeah.
They kind of, when you're scanning a crowd, that's how they stand out a little bit.
The other threat that we sadly foresee is school safety, because the schools are hardening their physical, that a shooter can't just walk in. There's vestibules now and just physically. The war in Ukraine has raised global awareness of how drones can be weaponized. So these evil, horrible people who now walk into schools may weaponize drones in the future, which I can't comprehend why they do it ever, but, it's a scarily logical next progression.
Yeah. No, you got the,
You ready to go?
yeah, I think.
Oh, that's me. So, regulatory landscape. So when I started the company, I was, obliviously happy, thinking I was doing the common good, and I wouldn't worry about the fact that the FAA categorized drones as aircraft, and interfering with that carried some pretty hefty criminal and financial penalties. I figured the laws would catch up, no problem. And then I learned about the FCC regulations about interfering with someone's radio network. Marriott paid about a $600,000 fine in 2014 for blocking people's Wi-Fi hotspots so they could sell them Marriott service. So then, I'm like, okay, but those are antiquated. This is public safety. This is common good. It'll be fine. And then I learned about the privacy and civil liberties, and said, well, I will be dead before these 4 organizations agree on changes. So the Protecting Emerging Threat Act of 2018 gave 4 entities the ability to operate counter-UAS equipment that would violate those federal laws. So if you're not DOD, DOJ, Department of Energy, or Homeland Security, you basically cannot operate this. So the FAA, they've studied this problem for a long time. By September of 2022, any newly manufactured drone was required to broadcast information about itself, its location, the pilot location, its flight path, its altitude, and so that receivers could legally receive this information. So that is a step in the right direction. Existing drones have to comply with this broadcast requirement by September of this year, or they can only legally be flown in what's called a FRIA. It's like a model aircraft field. We know that the bad guys are not really that's not gonna slow them down, but it is something that they've progressed on. There was a report that was issued in 2020 which clarified all those regulations and just emphasized those 4 agencies were the only ones allowed to operate these counter-UAS systems that would trip those federal laws. Now, the Emerging Threats Act of 2018 was scheduled to sunset October 5th of 2022. It's currently operating under an extension through September of this year. And there are, the next 4 are various bills that have been proposed, which expand capabilities. Some of them establish a research and development center. Some fund the FAA to have additional capabilities. But I just saw that on Monday, the the FAA reauthorization bill of 2023. Remember, the first one was 2012. So this one proposes essentially just to extend the current regulations. The strike through expires in September 2023, replace that with expires September 2026. It also adds some really interesting aspects. If you use a system now that violates any of those regulations, the FAA can fine you $25,000. So I just read about this today. So I don't know if it's the user that gets fined or the manufacturer or both, but either way, there's some teeth behind it now. So it's an uncertain quagmire of regulations.
So Linda, I have a question. What is justice, public safety, and homeland security professionals are doing as these regulations are coming in to raise awareness, the challenges that you all face? So how are we providing input into these regulations?
So there are various agencies that have written letters and provided input. I sit on a group with the Security Industries Association. There's a counter UAS task force, and we've drafted letters to provide input and lobbying. There are other groups like the NFL, MLB, and different critical infrastructure agencies. They've all written letters to provide input, but it's a regulatory, you can see all the regulations that have to be considered.
So what is justice and public safety professionals or associations doing the similar thing? Is there any organization that is leading the charge, the challenges we're facing?
Yeah, definitely. And I think DHS is a big proponent. So the entities that are allowed to use like the enhanced detection and mitigation technologies, mostly we see them at like Tier 1, Tier 2 level events. Like we don't get them for every NFL game, but we had Army-Navy game in New Jersey back in 2021. That was an awesome experience for our guys to work with. Well, the FBI counter UAS team couldn't make it up. They had something else. So we had DHS, Customs and Border Patrol come up to work the mitigation side of things. So the relationship that we formed with them has definitely helped us over the past couple of years since that time. But as the threat increases, the special events coordinators from the FBI in Newark or wherever your office is, they're the ones that are calling the federal level assets to come out and help at some of these events, and they're just stretched so thin. So DHS, it seems like there was a little bit of a battle between the two, DHS and FBI, but it seems like DHS, especially with CISA, might be taking the lead. And what they're looking at doing after this 2018 Emerging Threats Act is they're looking to identify, 12 agencies in the country, state, local law enforcement, that they'll start training on enhanced equipment and mitigation. So that's definitely like what we're hoping comes in the next year or two, especially as we look. Is anybody hosting World Cup soccer in their jurisdiction? In 2026, there were huge issues over in Qatar last year. So we're looking at that, and we're looking at the future, and hopefully these changes are made to get those capabilities down to the state and local level, so we don't have to constantly be asking the federal resources. Does that make sense?
I also like to say that if you just waved a magic wand and said, okay, everybody who should mitigate can mitigate, it's still a pretty complex situation, because if you remember the way drones work, or just if you don't know, the radio controller the pilot has, and it sends commands to the drone, tells it where to go, what to do. The drone sends back confirmation information and video. If you disrupt that signal, which is what a lot of the tools do, the behavior of the drone is not guaranteed. So if I'm a really bad guy, I'm going to program my go home point, which is what's supposed to happen. It'll send it back to its home point. I'm going to program in the target. So all I've done is guarantee that my drone makes my target. Or the disruption could cause an accidental flyaway, like Mike was saying earlier. Drones can just go, and they'll just go forever. So the next step in that is, well, okay, we'll take over the drone control. That's a little bit safer. All right, so you take over drone control, and it's loaded with a bomb or whatever. And I don't know, Mike, what would you do? State police, you just took over a bomb.
Is it still in the air?
It's still in the air, and you're the pilot.
So, yeah, no, and that was definitely, I know that was jokingly.
It is, but it's not.
No, I know. And that was one of the considerations we took into account when we were planning the Army-Navy game with Border Patrols. We coordinated with our bomb squad. We had pre-designated locations that, so the way the system that was there worked they had 2 rings. If the drone entered the one ring, it would basically spoof it into thinking that it was the controller and have it go land in those pre-designated areas that we had with Jersey barriers for the bomb squad to respond. But then, yeah, if it was able to ignore that signal and enter the bowl of the stadium, they basically just turn up the amperage on the signal to the drone until it fries, and then it just falls out of the sky. And that's obviously the concerns. And then, even without mitigation equipment, just, let's say there's no detection equipment, you're just working a detail, and there's a guy flying a drone over the crowd, and you go to talk to him. We learned early on you can't just grab him and try to lock him up or something. You have to try to, have him land the drone safely, or have guys that are doing this that know a little bit about drones so that they can land it safely. But to the point of the slide, if there is, unintended consequences if you take control over it.
Okay. We lost our computer.
That's all right. All right, so, yeah, we're good. So response goals. Speaking on behalf of the task force we have in New Jersey, I always tell everybody, because everybody's initial response when I started talking about this a couple of years ago was, you can't do anything, you can't do anything. And it's not true. There is something we can do. And our primary focus is always to find the pilot. So detect, track, locate the operator. That's what we're going with. If anybody's interested too, the New Mexico Tech runs a class out in Albuquerque or Socorro now for counter UAS, and it's the same thing. Focuses on finding the operator. The next one, see what that is. All right, so we talked a lot about the federal regulations and the limitations. So what can public safety agencies do in the meantime? One low-cost method is social media outreach. Just prior to some major events, work with your public information office and have them tweet out or put something on Instagram that there can't be any drone flights over the crowd for the game or the event, and that'll try to help maybe eliminate some of those careless and clueless. And then I mentioned earlier we have that dashboard or website that's sponsored, and then it's something that we can give to people so they can learn more before they fly again. So that's just public outreach. It's cheap, it's easy. The legal detection methods, it's an expensive game. Buying the various types of equipment. Like Linda mentioned, her company has a passive RF detection system. So basically, it's just listening for the signature of the drone and the controller talking, and then there's different ways that system works. You could have multiple sensors where it triangulates the location of the operator or the drone, or there's also just single sensors, so you just know it's within a certain area, and then a lot of times it's easy to figure out, your best position to look for, over a lake versus a baseball field.
And then the FAA's remote ID is really going to be, I think, a game changer as soon as the drone fleets are newer.
No, absolutely, and we've updated the system, so we're starting to see more and more drones come in with the remote ID, which has given us the locations of the drone and the operator. But let's go back and remember the homemade drone we saw with the bazooka. That might have a pre-programmed flight where there is no RF connection between the drone and the controller. So really, our best attack at that would be like a radar system with some cameras. So the multi-layered approach, you see all the different systems up there. And then the biggest thing that we're working on now is just the integration of all those sensors into, and I know we've talked about AI a lot today, but there's technology out there where we can tie in all those various sensors into an AI component, which will basically, the RF will say, hey, I hear something, and the radar's like, I think I see something, and then they talk to each other, and then it cues the camera to that location, and it'll give the operators, eyes on. And that'll also minimize the kill chain on that, because we'll be able to get eyes on the drones quicker and then do a threat assessment to see if there's something hanging from it or anything like that. So,
Yeah, I'll just add that our team today tested with a new system. They're like a drone flight operation system that integrated our detection. They were flying drones. They're supposed to be flying drones there, doing whatever they're supposed to be doing, mapping, whatever. And then there's one that's not supposed to be there that our system detected. And they had a drone that flew autonomously straight to the pilot location. And then you could have your own pilot there to take over, but you've got eyes on that person, so you know who you're looking for.
Well, with that kind of situation, I could just easily see somebody that's good with technology getting into the remote and changing the location of the GPS. So is it actually coming from the remote ID? Is it actually coming from a drone, or from the remote, or from the phone that's connected to the remote?
So the remote ID is coming from the drone. It's a drone broadcast. But you're absolutely right. If you've got an educated person, they can spoof that and they can make the broadcast appear to be very far away. And I will tell you that one time I was talking with a federal agency who swore that their system picked up a drone that was being flown from like the Indian Ocean. I'm like, no, it wasn't.
I saw one yesterday on our system, and basically the GPS location was zeroed out. So yeah, it puts it out like over by Africa or something.
Yep.
You cut a wire in your GPS.
Yeah, yeah. But that's why you want to have, so if your threat is that level of a threat and the risk you're trying to mitigate is high, then you want to use an advanced type of sensor that looks at the physical signal level. So it looks at the power of the signal in the area. You can't spoof that. And so something that has both built in is ideal.
And then with that, is it going to be similar to like an ADS-B actually aircraft that, comes up on a map? So if I'm 3,000 feet and I look at my ADS-B and it shows an aircraft with straight at me, is it going to know the difference? Is it going to be projected to pilots? Any of that?
It wouldn't get an airplane or ADS-B. It would just be.
Would the ADS-B pick it up? Because I've got in and out on my transponder. Would it pick up that drone and tell me there's an aircraft coming at me?
No.
So it's different.
Yeah, it's a different. Yeah. Yeah. So that's a potential development that I know people are talking about is in your drone system, put in ADS-B capability to help people differentiate between planes and drones because they look the same, that far away.
I'm from New Jersey, so is New Jersey Rock using drones you're with New Jersey State Police, so is that what's happening? Because what I saw in a demo, and again, I was thinking it was a video that you showed, but they used, the license plate reader to locate for or something similar to that, I'll put it that way, that was identifying the vehicle, like in an Amber Alert. We've all been getting those notices while we've been here. So I'm just wondering.
Yeah, that sounds like an ALPR, but that's not tied into like any of our drone stuff.
So would they be operating something like that?
The ALPR? Yeah, we have. I know we have several ALPRs throughout the state. I don't know too much about them. I think they're on some of the bridges, and then they can be deployed. A lot of times, we'll deploy them to mass gathering events and have them set up like down the road. So we're kind of scanning cars in and out.
I want to go back into this slide, right? So what are you doing? So you have to acquire detection technology, right? So that means you have to look at your policies and processes, right? So what are some of the challenges or the lessons learned as you're developing your policies?
Maybe the next slide. So, oh wait, we're jumping ahead. That's fine. So some of the lessons learned in New Jersey with like funding and stuff, is that what?
From the policy side.
From the policy side, on the federal level.
Federal level and from your state and local, right, implementing in your agency, you have to consider, like you talked about privacy and civil liberties, right? Some of those challenges. So what are some of the lessons learned? If you have a slide later, then talk later, but just to get your perspective. What are some of the challenges?
For the counter UAS stuff, we really don't have a policy in place. I wrote one and submitted it, and they said we were good without one. But I think it's because it said drones, and they were tired of listening to me put in policies for drones, so they didn't read it to see that it was counter drones, and I was talking about something different. So we're just doing a good job, or as best we can, to follow the federal regulations. That relationship that we made with the DHS science and technology guys back in Army Navy, we talk to them all the time about the equipment that's out there, and that's very important for agencies to consider too. Is just there's so much equipment out there. It's not all legal because of the FCC regulations that Linda spoke about. So just knowing what equipment you're buying, making sure that it's going to be legal. You know, hopefully with the expansion of the enhanced detection capabilities. Hopefully with the enhanced detection capabilities, it'll allow those equipment to be used. But also, we want to make sure that we're staying in line with the right equipment. So DHS Science and Technology Directorate is testing. It's like they're doing the R&D and the testing for us, which is good because we don't want to get caught buying the wrong equipment and then get jammed.
$25,000 fine coming. Next.
Oh yeah. So state and local restrictions. We get this question a lot. People call the state police. You know, a town has a craft fair that weekend, and they want to enact like a temporary ordinance that people can't fly over their park. And the word there, "fly over the park," is where they're wrong. So they can't enact legislation or ordinances that will restrict airspace. Only the FAA can control the airspace. But like MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, there's a local ordinance that you can't take off or land from MetLife property. So when they do take off during NFL games, besides the fact that there's a TFR for the game and they're in controlled airspace for Teterboro, they usually just get hit with a local ordinance for taking off, on the complex. But there's signs, it's all over the place, it's on their tickets. State and national parks, there's usually can't fly drones there. So prior to a detail, that's one of the things that we do. We talk to the local agency, find out if there's any ordinances that are in our favor to help out with enforcing. Like I said, most of the time when we interact with the drone operators at these big events, it's a dad and his kid, or it's, and they're pretty compliant. But there are several New Jersey statutes that were written that are drone centric. And basically the first one is like a careless use of drones, which is good because, flying over a crowd, flying above 400 feet, flying beyond visual line of sight and over a crowd are usually the two biggest ones that are being violated at big events. So if things have to go that way and the person's going to get locked up, I feel comfortable charging them with the careless use because we can go to court and testify that they're violating at least 2 FAA regulations. We have a drunk droning statute, so I don't know how that works. You're flying a drone and you're not compliant and we put you on the box. I don't know. Can't take wildlife with drones. You can't fly over prisons. So New Jersey has several drone statutes that are in place that help us out with being able to, stop, talk to someone, have probable cause to talk to them, because that's, the civil rights issues and is that the Fourth Amendment? Being able to stop and hold them and ask them for identification and stuff like that. So that's what the ground we're standing on. And then a lot of times at the big events, we have to look at, you know, a multitude of factors depending on where the event's at. Is the drone flight, is it dangerous? Like, is it over the crowd or is he off to the side? You know, is it worth stopping him? You know, it's perfectly legal to fly here. He's not over the crowd. You know, just because we detect a drone or see a drone doesn't mean we have to go, you know, grab somebody. You know, is there any violations? And then reporting individuals. There's been a few instances where maybe we didn't lock them up that day and charge them, but there were several violations. Their information was obtained by the local officers. They called us later for guidance, and then we would reach out to the FAA. There was a job last summer. There was a medevac at one of the beach resorts, and a guy was flying a drone right over the medevac, and they couldn't take off with the patient. They were able to find him a couple blocks away, flying the drone from his deck, and they got all of his information, but they really weren't sure what they could do. So when they reached out to us, we spoke with the FAA, and they actually went after him and charged him federally and then state-wise with the interfering with first responder activities.
That was going to be my question. Do you often have the FAA where you contact them and let them know, they say it's somebody who's actually Part 107, and they take their license from them or anything like that?
We have a good relationship with a FAA LEAP agent. It's a law enforcement assistance program agent. I don't know how many of them are in their country. I think we're just lucky, you know, being in the Northeast. There's like 2. There's one in Philly and one in New York. But, you know, you go down south, there might be one for West Virginia down to Florida. You know, their territory can be pretty big. But they're very helpful. So FAA is very much focused on allowing people to fly in the airspace. And the LEAP agents, while they don't have a lot of enforcement authority, I think that might start to change. There was some talk about like the air marshals having authority over drones, but I think the LEAP agents have been a big help, and then they'll connect with the FBI on some of the other cases we had.
There's statutory language to what payload they can have?
No, it's just a matter of what the drone can handle. There's no statutory guidance on the payload limits.
What would somebody think about that?
It changes, and it varies so much because your payload varies by the weather conditions even, and how far you fly it.
The reason I ask, sort of, if you're permitted for a specific, let's say you're an explosive, you're using it to release an avalanche, you'd be permitted to do so. But if you're not permitted, wouldn't you want to see some statutory language to specify that as a policy or as a legality?
Oh, I don't know. That's out of my wheelhouse. Yeah.
I did hear about the avalanche stuff.
Yeah.
Technically, there's certain
sounds like fun.
explosive items you can't.
Like being a bomb guy and a drone guy.
That's your dream come true.
There's a drone, does mean it's got some kind of explosive device. I want to know the guy at the other end of it knows what the hell he's doing.
Yeah.
He's permitted. If he's not,
Oh,
I would think that should be something we would look at.
you're talking about legal use explosives dropped from drones for avalanche control.
And the criminal.
That would be like,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm sure there are regulations
I would
on how
think
much
so.
they, you know, with some master blaster association, they might be able to regulate how much they can carry on those drones to do that.
If we're dropping heroin into the prison, heroin's the illegal substance, so you get it for that.
Well, they overestimate the drone capability pretty regularly because they don't account for the wind and the distance and all that sort of thing. But I know we're about to run out of time. We have run out of time.
Yeah.
We go to next. Yeah, well, so we'll just comment on the need for mobile drone detection. Law enforcement and the military have all demanded a system that can be set up and torn down and set up and torn down because, as Mike mentioned, the equipment's kind of expensive, so you can't afford to have it placed around everywhere permanently. And I think we've got some pictures next of some of your
I can
deployments.
talk real quick too. So real quick, New Jersey, we identified a capability gap through a THIRA SPR. Identified the capability gap. There was no drone detection capability in New Jersey. Drones were a threat. We highlighted that. 2019, I think it was the
fiscal year 20 grants, there was a notice of funding for emerging threats, UAS. So we took our THIRA SPR, we wrote up the grant, we submitted it for that emerging threats UAS notice of funding, and we got our first UASI grant with that. Since then, they did away with that emerging threats line, and we've been using the protecting soft targets notice of funding line to go after the counter UAS equipment. We've done it with the North and the Southport security grants for us, so Philadelphia and New York. And what we did is we created a statewide counter UAS task force in the Office of Homeland Security. And then from there, we worked with the Sector New York and Sector Delaware Bay Port Security. So we're getting grant money out of them now. Plus the partnerships there with NYPD and Philly. We're kind of stuck in between, but we look at like World Cup Soccer, where they're both going to be hosting, and there's a lot of events in New Jersey. Our equipment is pretty much standardized from New York down through Jersey into Philadelphia, so we can all work together with some of the same equipment. I think that's all I have. I just wanted to, real quick, how we kind of went after the money, formed task forces, wrote MOUs with other agencies. And the big, so our state counter UAS task force is made up of state police, human services police, because they have a really good drone guy that works for human services police, and then Department of Corrections is our other big partner with Homeland Security. So pretty much that, you know, especially in the grants, FEMA likes to see a whole community approach with different agencies and stuff like that. So it's been working well for us. So if anybody has any questions, you can email me, and if your agencies are trying to get stuff, we can help out.
And we, just to wrap up, we also have a collaborative drone detection network. We received, my company received a contract to make the sensors mobile and more rugged for military deployments, that's the product that state police purchased. Also, 3 counties of emergency management in New Jersey purchased those products. And we have been selected and funded by the Air Force to build out a collaborative drone detection network. So thinking of what Maria was talking about earlier, it's the community, it's the collaboration, and sharing of the data. So there's drone detection data. All these entities need to figure out when they want to share their data, who they want to share it with, how they want to allow sensors to connect and expand the network, and just build out those different rules and capabilities. And
Is it a license to operate? I mean, for a legitimate purpose? I mean, I know that careless and criminal and all that are not going to do that.
For drones?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you're going to fly it for commercial purposes or public safety, you need a Part 107 pilot's license, which really just tests your FAA knowledge. There's no practical exam.
Right.
So.
No practice landing.
No, so for that, you know, talking about that, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, has like a course that you can run. It's kind of becoming like a national standard for drone pilots. Like, it shows proficiency on different aircraft.
Yeah. So I guess just to summarize, the drone threats are here, they're real, they're on the rise. Very effective technique to prevent the clueless and careless is to educate the public and your staff to help spot the potential drone threats. If you deploy drone detection technology, you want to match it to your risk level. If a remote ID receiver is good enough for you, they're very low cost and you can be in a lot of places. If you're expecting people to change the GPS and attack, then you need a higher level. And if you're going to be a radio silent drone, then you need another level of radar, but match to your situation and find the pilot to hopefully prevent the issues from happening.
So Michael, I have a question for you. You talked about MOUs, right? Because that's also the partnership, right, that you're putting together. Are you willing to share those MOUs with other agencies from what you have developed so they can benefit from that?
Yeah, sure, whatever.
Because that's something that we always get asked is where I can go look for something that already has been done. and if there are MOUs, policies,
Yeah.
everybody comes and asks, because of course there's no centralized place to look for. So if you're okay, if somebody asks a question, we'd love to actually point in your direction.
Yeah, another issue I think Colonel Fuente brought up this afternoon when I was talking to him in the back there, with the Chinese drones and law enforcement, and changing subjects into like law enforcement using drones is, everybody's using DJI drones. And the biggest problem that I've seen is the US drones are starting to come along, they're starting to get better, but they're more expensive. And then if you try to use federal grant funding, it can be a very hard process because it goes through several reviews because it's considered a controlled equipment list item. So it's not in the favor of law enforcement right now. It's easier to buy the Chinese drones and they're cheaper. So things need, especially on that side, things need to change too to make it a little bit easier to buy the US drones.
All right, so I know we start a few minutes late, but does anybody have questions for Linda or?
We can have a beer, I'll answer questions.
Yeah.